or the reach doesn't mean that we fall. Right? For many of our patients, that's become inefficient. And it's the inefficiency of the APA that produces the need to compensate. Yes, no. This is way too complicated, but I wanted to raise the question, or raise the whether posture and movement are coordinated together or separate within the central nervous system is a current controversial discussion. Right. So the most recent literature on it is saying that there is both independent ways of producing posture and movement, and there are convergent channels. And they've actually found these little neurons in the pontomedullary reticular formation, and this was in an article written last year. They call it bimodal cells that produce both stance of the cat and swing of the paw. Sorry, and swing of the other side. So the same cell produces stance and swing of the opposite side. And they've got cats, you know, on all fours, reaching for something, right? And the same cell allows for the stabilizing through the three limbs that are on the floor and the moving, flexion movement of the other. So posture and movement at a central nervous system level are interlinked. The cortico-reticular spinal system is one of the descending systems. So remember I showed that picture of the whole central nervous system, and you had the cortex playing down to the brainstem, brainstem to spinal cord. This is one of those black lines. Cortex, reticular. Reticular is in the brainstem level, spinal cord pathway. And it is the major system in humans that allows us to be up on our feet. It is the biggest system in terms of pathways, in terms of descending neurons. There's something like 30 million of these axons, whereas the corticospinal has 1 million. So we've got lots of this stuff, right, because we need it to be up against gravity. It's what's responsible for producing APAs. And it produces, it plays down onto all four limbs and allows us to produce the complex postural changes that underpin all of our voluntary movement. So again, if you want to read about one descending system in terms of its influence on movement, this is a great starter place. Specifically to locomotion, it was the pathway in Grillner's diagram, reticular spinal to spinal cord, that turns on or transmits the signals that turn on the central pattern generators. And because it acts over multiple muscles, right, it's involved in producing the appropriate activity in all four limbs. So I think from this system's perspective, you have to look at your whole patient when they come in with an issue in one place. Because if they come in with an issue in one body part, right, the system that allows you to be up against gravity doesn't just speak to our body part. There's not a bit of the brain that activates the leg and a bit of a brain that activates the upper limb and another bit that activates the trunk. This system speaks to the whole four limbs and girdle. So the deficit in one area will have impacted the influence of this system to the rest of the body. All the inefficiencies in terms of the expression of APAs may be why they have the deficit in that one area. Going to skip that one. This is the pathway. So what's important here is that you've got a pink line. This is brainstem level, a pink line, a pink circle, and a pink line that goes down one side, ipsilateral. and a green line that goes down both sides. So this is looking at only one side of the cortex. So the right cortex has 3 pathways down and the left cortex has 3 pathways down. This is the basis for the statement that post-cortical stroke, there's no such thing as hemiplegia. So both sides of the body are affected when this system is involved, which it is in every cortical lesion. And this is to speak to, not only does this system play down to both sides of the body in the tracts, but when it gets down to the spinal cord, it has the richness of connection to the spinal cord of any descending system. So it gets its message out through lots of interneurons to lots of levels in a very clever manner, right? So you may have one axon that comes down. That axon will send influence to many levels, right? And the way it connects into the spinal cord will be the same at each level. So it provides for this very patterned activation between the 2 sides of the body. Co-contraction I've mentioned. I wanted to put this in here to say that APAs, right, postural control, is not co-contraction. So static fixation, muscles staying on, not adapting as the person moves within the field of gravity, is an inefficiency of APAs, and it's not a good thing. It's in the literature, it's shown in people who are less skilled in their motor performance. So the young being challenged or the elderly being challenged. Vestibulospinal system is another important descending system to keep us up against gravity. And to say here that the vestibulospinal system it's not the corticovestibulospinal system. So here's a system that is from the vestibular nuclei in the brainstem down to the spinal cord. At the moment, we believe it to be relatively automatic, right? So this is a fast-acting system that produces the ability to be up. So it turns on extension. It has significant connections in terms of head and eye, and it is turned on in response to gravity and displacement. Now, clinically, I'm going to skip to this second slide. I want to speak to it in terms of the foot. Right? So I want to connect the vestibulospinal system with the information that I've put in terms of the cutaneous mechanoreceptors within the foot and the information about load. Right? So we know that the vestibulospinal system has a role in what we call linear extension, but you were saying the other day, Deb, axial extension. This is the thing that was, you know, what I have to say was we used different words, but what was really cool, and to be honest is the essence of why we both are here now 2 years later, we were saying the same thing, right? But we were just using different language. So the vestibulospinal system keeps us up against gravity in terms of by providing linear extension. Given that we know load is a sensory afferent input that potentiates stance phase, that potentiates extension, and that the load receptors include the mechanoreceptors from the foot, it's a very small clinical bridge to consider the foot as a very important source of afferent input to access the vestibulospinal system, right? So I'm trying to be clear there in terms of what we know in the science and then the clinical bridge that we're making. So clinically, we see the areas of the body that we can't cortically activate. So we can't cortically move T6 on T7. We can't be told to do that movement. We can't cortically move the bones of the midfoot. Right? We believe that the